Okay, y'all, I need you to sit down for this one, because what I'm about to walk you through about Rick Ross is genuinely one of the most dramatic image collapses I have ever documented, and I've been doing this a long time. Rick Ross spent almost 2 entire decades convincing the world that he was untouchable. Rick Ross convinced us he was the biggest boss in hip-hop, the last real luxury rapper standing, the man with the mansion, the jets, the acres, the empire, the untouchable bag. And now, in 2026, that entire story is unraveling in slow motion, and the internet is dragging every single loose thread until the whole costume falls off. I want to be very clear on something before we go one step further. This is not a hit piece. This is not personal. This is a receipts-driven breakdown of how a man who used to sit at the very top of the culture became one of the most joked-about names in the room, and I have the clips, the timelines, and the paper trail to back up every single beat of this story. So grab a snack, get comfortable, and let me show you exactly how the wheels came off the Maybach. Let's start with the moment that broke the illusion for a lot of longtime fans. Ricky bought himself a Gulfstream. He put his own name on the tail. He posted the jet constantly. That plane was the whole flex. That plane was the whole personality for a stretch of years. And then, out of nowhere, people caught Rick Ross standing in a commercial airport terminal, hoodie on, head down, looking like he did not want a single camera pointed at him. Now, let's be adults about this. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a wealthy man flying commercial. Nothing. The problem is not the flight. The problem is that this is the exact same rapper who built an entire brand identity around never doing that. The problem is the contradiction, and the internet does not forgive contradictions like that. Ricky came out and said the jet was down for a Starlink upgrade. $500,000 Wi-Fi, he said. Flying to Colombia to link with Trick Daddy, he said. And listen, that explanation might even be true, but the damage was already done, because for a full week the running joke online was that Rick Ross was hiding in the TSA line like the rest of us. Uncle Murda made a joke. Podcasts made jokes. Meme pages made jokes. And every single one of those jokes chipped away at the myth. But the jet was just the first crack. The second crack is way bigger, and this is where things start to feel financially uncomfortable for Rick Ross. Reports started circulating that the Port of Miami 20th Anniversary Tour was moving tickets at a pace nobody expected from a self-proclaimed 9-figure boss. 2-for-1 deals started showing up on certain dates. Screenshots of half-empty arenas started floating around. And then, of course, Drake noticed. Drake reposts a soft ticket report, and suddenly the entire timeline is asking the question nobody wanted to ask out loud. Is Rick Ross actually as rich as Rick Ross keeps telling us he is? Now hold that question in your head, because I promise you, by the end of this video, that question is going to get very interesting. Before we dig into the money, we have to talk about the character, because the character came first. William Leonard Roberts II was born January 28, 1976, in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and he grew up in Carol City, Florida. Carol City is the kind of neighborhood where the block right next to yours looks like a completely different tax bracket, and Ricky has said many times that watching that contrast is what lit the fire under him. He played football in high school. He was actually talented. He even earned a scholarship to Albany State University in Georgia. But school did not last. Music won. And here is where the first real question mark shows up in the timeline, because between roughly 1995 and 1997, before any of us knew the name Rick Ross, William Roberts took a job as a corrections officer at the South Florida Reception Center in Miami-Dade County. I want you to understand how important that detail is. Not because there is anything wrong with being a corrections officer. There isn't. It is a real job. It is a difficult job. The issue is that when Ricky started rapping, the entire brand was built on being the exact opposite of a corrections officer. The entire persona was drug empire, street royalty, kingpin cinema. And when the truth started leaking, Ricky did not handle it the way a lot of people would have handled it. In 2008, a photo surfaced online. Rick Ross, in uniform, on the clock. His first instinct was to deny it. He said it wasn't him. He said the picture was fake. Days later, the smoking gun published his employment records. Hiring paperwork. Salary information. Resignation date. full paper trail. And overnight, the internet had a new nickname for the biggest boss in the game. Officer Ricky. That name has followed Rick Ross for almost 20 years, and it is arguably the single most expensive PR mistake of his entire career, because if he had simply owned it on day one, the story dies in a week. Instead, he denied it, got caught, and gave 50 Cent an open microphone that 50 Cent has never, ever put down. Speaking of 50 Cent, we have to talk about that war, because that war is still going on. It never actually ended. It just changed jerseys. 50 turned the Officer Ricky moment into an entire diss campaign, cartoons, interviews, t-shirts, everything, and Ricky's response was to keep grinding. To be fair, in the short term, it worked. Ricky kept dropping albums. Port of Miami went #1. Trillo went #1. Deeper Than Rap, Teflon Don, God Forgives I Don't, Mastermind, project after project after project. On paper, Rick Ross was winning. On paper. But the story of Rick Ross has always been about the space between the paper and the reality, and this is where the second controversy of his early career lies. The name itself. The literal name Rick Ross was borrowed from Freeway Ricky Ross, the real Freeway Ricky Ross, the man who was actually locked up doing life at the time William Roberts adopted the stage identity. Freeway got his sentence reduced. Freeway came home in 2009. Freeway filed a $10 million lawsuit in 2010 accusing Rick Ross of profiting off his name and his story. That case dragged on for 4 years, and in 2014, the courts ruled in favor of the rapper on First Amendment grounds. Legally, Ricky won. Culturally, that verdict never fully closed the debate, because a lot of people still feel, to this day, that the biggest boss in hip-hop wears another man's name on his chest. Now stack these two things on top of each other for a second. The corrections officer's story he denied. The kingpin name that wasn't his. That is the foundation. That is the base of the pyramid. And Ricky spent the next 15 years piling more and more marble on top of a foundation that was already cracking, and for a long time nobody could see the cracks because Rick Ross was untouchable in a business sense. Maybach Music Group. Meek Mill. Whale. French Montana. Amarian. 25 Wingstop locations. Checkers. Rallies. Bel Air. Bumbu. Jeddock. Books. A 235-acre estate in Georgia. 109 rooms. 60,000 square feet. Ricky called it the Promised Land, and honestly, for a long time, it looked like exactly that. But here is the thing about a promise. A promise has to be delivered on. And in 2026, the delivery is coming into question. Let's talk about the jewelry, because this is one of the funniest and most damaging clips of the entire decade for Rick Ross. Watch collector after watch collector went on camera and said, on the record, that certain pieces Ricky has been photographed and are not what he claims they are. One specialist looked directly into the camera and said, and I quote, "That watch was only produced twice, one in 37mm, one in 41mm, and I know both owners, and neither one of them is Rick Ross." Miami jewelers started getting called out for allegedly selling him stones that were not what the invoice said they were. And every time one of these clips goes viral, Ricky's response is essentially the same. It's just me having fun. It's just green stones. It's just an AP. Nothing to see here. But you cannot spend 20 years telling the world you are the ultimate luxury rapper, the greatest, the biggest, the motherboat, and then shrug when the luxury itself gets questioned. That is a contradiction the algorithm feeds on. That is a contradiction TikTok feeds on. And that is the exact contradiction Drake weaponized in 2024, which is the fight that changed everything. Because for years, Drake and Rick Ross were brothers. Stay schemin'. Aston Martin Music. Lemon Pepper Freestyle. Money in the Grave. That was the safest, most bulletproof duo in commercial rap. And then Future and Metro Boomin dropped We Don't Trust You. Kendrick jumped on like that. Drake reached for the pen, and Ricky picked a side. Ricky picked the opposite side. Drake responded on Push-Ups with the line, "I might take your latest girl and cuff her like I'm Ricky," a direct callback to the Officer Ricky lore, and Rick Ross went nuclear. Champagne Moments dropped almost overnight. It wasn't a rap battle, it was a personal demolition attempt. Ricky went at Drake's ethnicity. Ricky went at Drake's father. Ricky went at Drake's alleged surgical procedures. Ricky called him BBL Drizzy, and that nickname stuck to Drake's back like superglue. In the moment, in April of 2024, a lot of people thought Rick Ross had bodied it. Then Kendrick Lamar dropped Not Like Us, the entire timeline moved on, and everybody assumed the beef was over. Everybody except Ricky. And this, right here, is the exact moment the public perception of Rick Ross starts to permanently shift, because Ricky did not stop. Weeks passed. Months passed. Kendrick got a Grammy. Drake started slowly rebuilding. And Rick Ross kept going. New interview? Drake shot. New podcast? Drake shot. New Instagram Live? Drake shot. When Drake released the Iceman project and appeared to reference Ricky on Make Them Pay, Ricky did not just respond. Ricky sat on camera and read the negative comments about Drake out loud, like a talk show host doing a roast segment. Then he went on Patrick Bet-David and dragged the project. Then he went on the Joe and Jada Kiss podcast and dragged it again. And Fat Joe, on that same podcast, essentially asked the question everybody was thinking. Bro, why are you still on this? That is when the meme cycle changed. Up until that point, the meme was BBL Drizzy. After that, the meme became Washed Ricky, Overexposed Ricky, Obsessed Ricky. And that pivot in the internet's tone toward Rick Ross is not something you can spin your way out of, because once the culture starts laughing at you instead of with you, the reputation math changes forever. Then came the punch. Yeah, we have to talk about the punch. Rick Ross was filmed at an event playing Not Like Us to a crowd, and shortly after, a physical altercation broke out and Ricky ended up on the wrong side of it, visibly, on camera, in front of the internet. Drake later referenced this on a track with a bar so layered it made hip-hop analysts write essays about it. TLC. Tables, ladders, and chairs, like the wrestling event. TLC, the R&B group with a member named Left Eye, because of where Ricky got hit. TLC, tender loving care. Triple entendre. Surgical. And the security footage discussion that followed made everything worse, with commentators openly saying, Ricky should not have been there, security told him not to be there, and yet there Ricky was. Now watch how this compounds. Officer Ricky Lore, resurrected. BBL Drizzy invented, then turned against him. Fake watch clips, viral. Fake jewelry clips, viral. Commercial flight clip, viral. Slow tour tickets, viral. 2-for-1 promo screenshots, viral. And every single one of these stories, individually, is survivable. Nobody's career ends because of one clip. Careers erode because of a compounding pattern of clips, and Rick Ross has walked into a full compounding pattern. Let me hit you with the moment that maybe crystallizes all of this. 50 Cent, on camera, essentially says Ricky lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. Ricky, who owns a 235-acre estate, is being publicly claimed to live in a 2-bedroom. It doesn't matter whether it's true. It doesn't matter whether it's provable. What matters is that the internet believed it long enough to make it a meme. When the biggest boss in the room can be publicly reduced to a 2-bedroom joke and it sticks, that is not a rap beef. That is a brand collapse. And Ricky is trying to fight all of it at the same time. All of it. At the same time. Drake, 50, Gilly, watch collectors, jet reports, tour reports. He is fighting a war on 6 fronts, and every single hip-hop veteran will tell you, you cannot win a war on 6 fronts in the internet era. The internet doesn't get tired. The internet doesn't sleep. The internet remembers everything. And every new Rick Ross interview is currently being clipped, slowed down, subtitled, duetted, and used against him. Now let's zoom out, because I want you to see what Rick Ross is actually up against, because it is not really 50 Cent, and it is not really Drake, and it is not really the Watch Guys. What Rick Ross is up against is the collapse of a myth. For 17 years, the story of Rick Ross was, this is a man who built the empire himself, no cosigns, no cheat codes, no plug. Ricky himself has said it on record. Eminem didn't save him. Dr. Dre didn't sign him. Slip and Slide put him on. He built the machine. And that story, that self-made story, is the entire foundation of why fans defended Rick Ross for so long. But once you start pulling that thread, the whole sweater comes apart because Ricky borrowed the name of a real drug dealer to build a drug dealer character while working as a corrections officer and denied both of those things and then got caught on both of those things and then kept telling us he built it himself. The self-made story and the receipts do not match. And in 2026, on an internet that can find a 2007 employment record in under 60 seconds, the receipts always win. Let's talk about what this actually costs him financially, because we started this video with a question. Google Rick Ross' net worth right now. You will see $150 million. That number has been floating for years. Rick Ross has been asked on camera to confirm that number, and instead of confirming it, Ricky screams. Ricky laughs. Ricky changes the subject. Ricky says he has 25 ventures. Ricky says his club performances alone pay for his year. Ricky says he just got back from Dubai, and he's flying to Canada Friday. All of which may be true. None of which is a yes. And here is why that matters. In 2026, image is currency. Perception is worth actual money. Sponsorship deals, brand partnerships, tour guarantees, booking fees, everything downstream of Rick Ross is now negotiating against the memes. A promoter looking at ticket velocity is not looking at the 235 acres. A brand partner looking at a fake watch clip is not looking at the Wingstop locations. And that is why the smallest cracks in the Rick Ross story are actually the biggest threats to his business, because the business was always built on top of the story, and the story is springing leaks. So the question I want you to sit with, and I want you to comment on this below, because I am genuinely reading these, is this. Is Rick Ross actually going broke? Or is Rick Ross simply being exposed for something more painful than being broke? Because there is a version of this story where Ricky is still fine financially, still doing 8 figures a year, still living exactly the life he says he lives. And there is another version of this story where the mansion, the jet, the tour, the watches, the acres, and the ventures do not quite add up to the number he keeps letting Google publish. And in 2026, that gap between the number on Google and the actual bank statement is the real fight of Rick Ross's life. Here is what I keep coming back to. Rick Ross could have been a legend without any of this. Ricky has classic albums. Ricky has iconic hooks. Ricky has one of the most identifiable voices in hip-hop history. Ricky genuinely built an incredible business ecosystem from scratch. If Rick Ross had leaned into the businessman, the mogul, the mentor, if Rick Ross had let the music and the Wingstops do the talking, this conversation does not happen. But instead, Rick Ross keeps stepping into the ring, keeps swinging at Drake, keeps swinging at 50, keeps posting the watches, keeps flexing the jet, keeps daring the internet to fact-check him. And the internet, in 2026, is a machine that never turns down that invitation. There are 3 lessons buried in the Rick Ross story that every artist, every entrepreneur, and honestly, every person building a brand right now needs to hear. Lesson 1. If your past is going to come out, and it is always going to come out, own it before anyone else defines it. Officer Ricky is a nickname that only exists because of a denial, not because of a job. Lesson 2. Whatever image you build, you have to live inside of every single day for the rest of your career, because the moment a contradiction shows up, the internet will make that contradiction your entire identity. And lesson 3, and this one might be the hardest one for Rick Ross. Not every shot needs a response. Sometimes the most powerful move in the entire game is to log off, drop the album, and let the work reintroduce you. Silence in 2026 is a flex. I do not know how the story ends for Rick Ross. Nobody does. Set in Stone is dropping July 17th, and Ricky is calling it luxury rap at its peak, the closest you will ever get to swimming in the water with the boss. Maybe that album is the reset. Maybe Set in Stone is the moment Ricky reminds the world exactly who he is on the microphone. Maybe the tour picks up. Maybe the punchline stops. Or maybe, and I am not celebrating this, I am just observing it, maybe the culture has already made up its mind, and Set in Stone drops into a landscape that has already moved on from the biggest boss in the game. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. The mansion is still there. The jet is still there. The acres are still there. The Wingstops are still there. The catalog is still there. Everything Rick Ross built is still, physically, exactly where he left it. But the story around all of that? The story is what actually pays the bills in hip-hop. And the story of Rick Ross in 2026 does not sound the way it used to sound. It sounds tired. It sounds defensive. It sounds like a man arguing with the internet at 3 in the morning about a watch, when he should be in the studio. And that right there is the real ending of this whole saga. Rick Ross did not lose his empire. Rick Ross lost the plot. Rick Ross forgot the #1 rule of being the biggest boss in the room, which is that the biggest boss in the room never, ever has to remind anybody that he is the biggest boss in the room. The moment you start reminding people, the moment you start defending it, the moment you start reading comments about your enemies on camera, you have already lost the throne. You are just the only person in the room who hasn't been told yet. So what do you think? Is Rick Ross broke, or is Rick Ross just human, and the culture is being unfair? Is Set in Stone about to save his entire year, or is it dropping into a landscape that has already stopped listening? And this is the one I really want your answer on. If you were Rick Ross's manager tomorrow morning, what is the very first phone call you make to fix this? Drop it in the comments. I am reading every single one, and the best answer is going in the next video. If any of this was even slightly interesting to you, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button, because we are going deep on the whole hip-hop chessboard this year, and there is one more name in this exact same collapse pattern that I have already started digging into, and trust me, when I drop that one, you are going to want to be here for it early. So hit subscribe, tap the bell, share this with the friend who still thinks Rick Ross is untouchable, and I will see you in the next one.